The National Union of Metal Workers has been talking about the situation at ArcelorMittal. They've slammed the situation there after 3 workers died. We're going to have more on that story in a moment. But first, one of our top stories this afternoon, the Eastern Cape Health MEC Sindiswa Gomba has been fired for her alleged involvement in the Nelson Mandela funeral fraud case. Now, all of this comes just 24 hours before Ace Magashule, the ANC Secretary-General, is due to appear in court again on corruption charges tomorrow. I'm joined by the Politics of Professor at the University of Johannesburg, Professor of Politics at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana. Professor, good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. For Oscar Mabuyane, the Eastern Cape Premier, to fire a health MEC during a pandemic, he must really want to do this.
Well, it's something that he should have done a long time ago, actually, because there were issues of incompetence around that lady. She didn't acquaint herself well, not only administratively in the Eastern Cape, but also in some of the unsavory comments she made nationally as part of the broader health team. And so there was a lot of outcry at the time that she was not particularly fit to do that job, and they protected her. And I think that the tide has turned somewhat now. There was this case is back up now, the funeral fraud case. And that thing, Stephen, is quite interesting, actually, because for 2 reasons. One, that case should not have been withdrawn. In fact, when it was withdrawn, Batohi, the national director, was quite surprised that the case had been withdrawn because there was a lot of evidence. You even had people who had turned state witnesses to corroborate whatever evidence there was. And so that told you that you still had bad apples within the NPA, and we hope to hear the full story about that. And secondly, of course, the Eastern Cape PEC wants to take the lead in terms of moral leadership within the ANC. And you might remember that at some point, they also said Jacob Zuma should face some disciplinary measures from the ANC. So they seem to be taking the lead, which is somewhat encouraging.
Earlier this week, the Eastern Cape ANC said that it was going to give the MEC, well, former MEC now, until the weekend, until the end of the week to resign before taking action against her. It's still Thursday and the Premier has taken action against her. Did the levels of frustration just rise? Did she just say to him, I'm not going to go? And I mean, I know sometimes in our politics we all get a bit conspiratorial, but it is only really 15, 16 hours until Ace Magashule, the Secretary-General, appears in court again tomorrow. Is there some link to that?
Well, there could be a link, but there's something else here, which is a long-standing problem within the ANC, expecting leaders to act on their conscience. And I think what has become clear now in the last few years is that most of them don't have any. And so the leadership, having decided based on its own policies, they have to act based on their own policies. Really, the whole idea that members should be guided by their conscience is a cop-out. It's cowardice. It's failure to exercise leadership. So there's always been that issue. It's either they step down or leaders exercise leadership, emboldened by their own policies. Thankfully, Mabuyane's PEC here PEC has decided that they will exercise the leadership that they've been empowered by the provincial leadership to act, and they have done exactly that. And I think related to that perhaps is a message to what is going to happen tomorrow and what is under consideration now, that people must step down. In any case, the recent NEC said whilst they are finalizing the guidelines on suspension, people are encouraged to step down. So Mabuyane is acting on the recent resolution of the NEC for people to step down and not await completion of the guidelines.
It also brings to mind another question, and you made the point about what's been happening in the courts in the Eastern Cape and that the case against her was withdrawn. But Sindiswa Gomba was appointed an MEC after she had been charged formally with involvement in this case. And let's just talk about what we're talking about. This was when she was, if I recall correctly, a councillor in Buffalo City. This was a group of people who tried to make money out of the funeral of Nelson Mandela. And yet, despite that, she was still actually appointed to this position. And the reason I say this is it suggests that she has a constituency in the ANC in the Eastern Cape that Oscar Mobuyane had to recognize in the first place.
Well, Stephen, it also has to do with what happened to the money, who got that money. In most cases, people who are caught with their fingers in the till are not the only ones who end up using that money. They are not the only culprits. These monies are then distributed to all manner of people, including senior members within the province. One of the accused there, for instance, is Phumlani Mkolo. Phumlani Mkolo is a senior fellow regional leader, very influential, who then distributed the money to all manner of people. So I would not be surprised if some of the PEC members also got a share of that money. So at times it becomes difficult to go against the one person who has been identified or the culprit, the obvious culprit, because the fear is that the culprit might spill the beans, exposing others who are connected in this thing. And this is where then we always have to be cognizant of the fact that these individuals represent a web of network, corruption network within these provinces. They are not just acting as lonesome rangers, but are part of networks. They steal on behalf of many. And at times they are forced to become sacrificial lambs. I'm afraid Gomba here will be a sacrificial lamb. But most importantly, Stephen, is that this sets a good precedence in that Mabuyane himself is alleged to have received some monies that he has characterized as a donation. And I'm not sure, it looks like those monies might have been reported to the public protector. So it would be interesting then what happens if the public protector comes back saying that he is guilty of getting money inappropriately, what he will do. So, but it's good that he's acting in this way. He's setting a good example. And therefore, we expect him to do similarly if and when he faces a similar situation.
Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed. A professor of politics at the University of Johannesburg.